Retro.
Yeah.
Electro. Tech.
Oh yeah.
Hey, turn the lights back on. Wow. Retro electro tech. When real audio ruled the world.
Well, hello there once again, ladies and gentlemen. This is Retro Ernest of Retro Electrotech. And what you see here before you is a Pioneer PL50, that's Papa Lima 50. Of course, it's a turntable, and mechanically, from what I understand, the customer told me it is in working condition. The problem is an intermittent channel issue that the customer feels is associated with the cables. So that's what it sounds like to me based on his description, that when he messes around with the cables, it seems to influence the intermittent channel issue. So I'm going to check that out, of course, give this thing a once over and see if it needs anything else. Perhaps I'll do a basic setup, things like that, when the time comes, once I suss out the main problem. Also too, just in case, he brought in his receiver slash amplifier that he has this turntable piped into, just in case there's a problem with the phono stage in it. So that may or may not come into play. I'm not sure yet. If everything seems to be the turntable being the problem, then I'm not going to mess around with the receiver. So other than that, let me go ahead and get to it. I'll just demonstrate that this thing is working, or at least I want to confirm that it is as far as mechanically, and go from there. Alright, so on this PL50, when I switch it on, it automatically lifts the tone arm. Okay, let me just see if we have platter rotation, and of course we do. And it looks like it's correct at 33 1/3 RPM, right about there. 45, yeah, that looks about right. I'll know for sure when I start testing it with some vinyl. Like I said, and I want to mention just right up front, I'm not going into a deep dive servicing of this turntable. My main objective is to assess the intermittent channel complaint, see if it's on account of the cables, a bad connection, and do some basic servicing, setup, and just make sure everything's lubricated okay and all that jazz, the usual stuff. And I'll get into that as I go along. But I know there's a lot of things that could be done and all that, but again, I'm just doing what the customer really is asking me to do. And since this is a working turntable, other than that intermittent channel, then all's good. So yeah, like I said, when you turn it on, it automatically lifts the tone arm. As you can see, that's the case. So and then when you switch it over to play, it automatically lowers the tone arm. So there's that. And this is an auto return unit, so let me go ahead and check that out. I do believe it has to be in the play position. So of course I don't want to, let me put the guard down on the stylus. Yep. So it automatically sends it back and shuts it off, as you just saw. So let me go ahead and check it out and see what's going on with that connection, if in fact that's the problem. And just real quick, I want to mention that I have this piped into the phono input of this little Realistic System 7 STA7 receiver that I just did some work on. In fact, these two customers are good buddies, and they brought their equipment in recently and all that jazz. So one piece of equipment is helping the other, just like the friends that they are. So anyways, also too, I have the I have the scope hooked up as well, the analog scope over here, the Tektronix scope. So the reason why I'm doing that too is because if there is a channel cutting in and out, it's easy for me to hear it here in the real world in the shop, but it may be difficult for you guys to discern the channel dropping out or getting intermittent if in fact that's what we have going on, but it'll be easier to visualize it on the scope. So that's why I have it set up like that. Okay, so I just have a piece of test vinyl going over here. Keep your eye on the scope, because what I'm going to do when I drop the stylus down, I'm going to be just kind of manipulating the cables on the back of the turntable and see if we get any dropping out of the you know, one or both of the channels or whatever the case. So let me go ahead and zoom in just a little bit. Let's see what we got going.
Band 5, low frequency sine wave test tones. 1,000 cycles per second.
Okay, one channel's a bit diminished. Okay, I'm moving the cable around. You see yeah, there's definitely a problem with this cable. Yeah.
800 cycles.
Yep. Yep, losing the other channel as well. Yeah. Yeah, there's a bad connection going on. Let me go ahead and
500 cycles.
Okay, enough of that. All right, and yeah, things are pretty bouncy too. Let me go ahead and back things off, and I'll be right back. Okay, so we definitely have something going on with the cable. Whether or not it's something going on internally within the cable or at the junction point where, you know, the cartridge / tone arm wiring connects up with the cable connections. I'll find that out once I gain access and, you know, take care of those connections. But in addition to that, I noticed that there was some diminishment on the right channel. You probably noticed that as well. So that could be on account of several things. It could be on account of that connection issue as well, because when you have higher resistance connections, because I noticed most of the connection issues seem to be on the right channel, except when I would really move the cable around, I got the left channel to drop out too. So there seems to be bad connections on both channels, but the right channel being the worst. And again, as I was saying, you know, when you have a real crappy connection and higher resistance connections, well, that can obviously affect the amplitude on one or both channels as well. You know, in addition to, of course, just causing the signal to cut out altogether. But then again, too, there could also be something going on. You know, if after I resolve the connection issues, the obvious connection issues on the underside, if that channel is still diminished on the right, there could be something going on with the cartridge. You know, as far as there can be an imbalance within the cartridge, maybe there's a problem there, or an alignment issue as far as just the way that the stylus is tracking within the groove. So there's a few things that could be going on in that regard, but let me just simplify it by saying that we want the stylus obviously to be tracking within the record groove. Say this is a record groove, this is a stylus. We want it straight on. We don't want it, you know, being forced over to one side or the other, favoring one side or the other, or whatever the case. You know, we want that thing to be nice and straight within the groove. So if there's something that's causing a problem there, you know, the alignment of the cartridge, maybe the roll angle, the yaw angle, or whatever the case, then yeah, that could be causing a problem too. So I'm going to check all that stuff as I go through a little bit more. But for starters, let me just make sure that we're starting off with a level platter. And I know my bench is pretty darn level, but sometimes you'll get a turntable that will vary a little bit because, you know, the feet on the bottom of the turntable might be worn in such a way or adjusted in such a way that you know, it's a little bit off and needs to be compensated for. But let me just set my level here. And yeah, that looks pretty good. The bubble is within the lines. You can probably see, let me just, yeah, you can see it's within the lines. You know, it's a little bit that way, but yeah, nothing to write home about, especially at this point, at this stage of the game. Let me check it on this axis. I'm just going to tilt my head over. I'm not going to move the camera just for that. And yeah, that's looking pretty good. It's within the lines as well. So great. So we're starting out with a level platter, which is good. And I'm going to, I'm just going to check the yaw angle real quick with the protractor and make sure that the cartridge isn't, you know, canted over, you know, one way or the other too much. Let's just make sure that everything is within the ballpark. So this is just going to be a quick ballpark check. Okay, so what I'm doing here is I want to make sure that the front of the cartridge here is not cattywampus and over too far this way or this way, referred to as the yaw angle, like this, okay? That angle. So the way I'm doing that is, you notice there's a dot over here on this side. There's also a dot over on this other side. The needle, the stylus tip, is currently sitting on that dot on this side, of course. And you'll notice these horizontal lines running, you know, running all the way across. So the horizontal line closest to the face of this cartridge should be straight on, nice and parallel, nice and even with the front of this cartridge. That's what we want. And that assures that, again, the cartridge isn't, you know, tweaked too far one way or the other. So, and we want to check it at both null points. These little dots here are referred to as null points. So we're going to check that. I'm going to move that over and line up the stylus tip on the other null point over here. And I'm going to look at the same, you know, set of horizontal lines, the horizontal line closest to the front of the cartridge. And it should be pretty darn close to being straight on, nice and even with, you know, the front of the cartridge. So they should be running parallel, nice and even. There's going to be a little bit of variation between the two. That's just the nature of the way these tone arms track across the vinyl, but it should be very, very, very minimal. And in fact, when I move this over and I notice, you know, there's a little bit of deviation from this one, you know, maybe it's a little bit more off on this side than it is on this side, then I want to adjust my cartridge just a little bit to find that sort of a compromise, if you will, between the two positions. And I might have to, you know, back these screws off just a little bit, just enough to kind of tweak the cartridge one way or the other, just a hair. Sometimes it's a very finicky adjustment to find that sweet spot, that compromise between the two null points. But once you get them and you kind of dial them in, they're going to be pretty darn close to being even with these horizontal lines closest to the face as possible, okay, between both spots. They're going to be pretty close. You know, again, you're going to find that compromise. So I'm going to check that. Right now I can tell you that when I look straight down, I can't, you know, angle the camera over the top. I would have to hand hold it. I'd be shaking and all that. But when I look straight down, these horizontal lines here, the horizontal line closest to the face is almost dead on with the front of this cartridge. So I'm going to see if that's the case over on this side, or pretty darn close. If it's close enough, I mean, you know, within a hair, then I'm going to call it good. I'm not going to have to tweak it and try to find the compromise between both spots. So I think you know what I'm trying to say. And that assures me that, you know, across the piece of vinyl, as this stylus tracks across the vinyl, the front of that cartridge is going to be pretty much dead on, and it's not going to be, you know, canted over one way or the other too much. So it's going to be, the objective again is for it to ride, you know, to ride in the groove nice and straight. You know, it shouldn't be, the needle shouldn't be tweaked in that groove. It should be riding in the groove you know, if the V of my fingers is the groove, it should be in there nice and straight, okay? As straight as possible. That's the objective throughout its travel across the vinyl, okay? So let me go ahead and move it over to this other position. Okay, so I have it moved over, and the camera angle, you know, it looks like it's off and all that, but looking straight down, I can tell you right now that it's actually pretty darn close. It's almost like it was just meant to be. So that's good. That tells me again that everything is in close enough alignment, and that's what I wanted to check, because again, if you know things are riding in the groove and they're, you know, in a cattywampus manner, things are off, and you know, the stylus is being pushed over to one side of the groove over another, if it's favoring one side or the other, well then of course you can experience channel diminishment, distortion, all kinds of garbage. So anyways, everything's looking good there. And also too, I checked the roll angle, which roll angle is, you know, that. I checked the roll angle out. It looks pretty good. It looks pretty darn even. So I don't think we're having any problems with the yaw angle or the roll angle. So that's pretty good. The one thing I will say is that I am going to order another stylus. I'm going to need to get a stylus for this thing, because the cantilever suspension seems to be a bit worn, and yeah, that stylus is a bit more bouncy than it should be. But also too, while I'm on that topic, let me go ahead and pull the cartridge and ohm it out and make sure there isn't some kind of gross imbalance between both channels, you know, both coils. So let me go ahead and check that out as well. Oh, and I almost forgot tracking force, but anyways, you can see it's tracking at 1.5 grams. That's exactly where the weight on the tone arm is set to, is 1.5 grams. So this thing is dead on. I don't know what the tracking force is for this cartridge, but I'd venture a guess it's pretty good in the ballpark. I mean, it's pretty much in the ballpark. I'm not going to worry about that too much right now, because I'm going to end up, you know, after everything's said and done and I do what I need to do with this turntable, I'm going to, you know, set everything accordingly. Like I said, I want to get another stylus on board and go from there. But I'm going to be going over everything anyways when I get back into a basic setup, when I wrap everything up. Okay, so I'm clipped onto the right channel of the cartridge, and we're looking at the resistance of the right channel's coil, and we're at about 660.1 ohms, 0.2, whatever. Now let me go ahead and clip onto the left channel, and we should be in that ballpark if everything is okay. 665. So perfect. Excuse me. We're right in the ballpark. So we don't have any you know, major imbalance going on between the right and the left channel of this cartridge. Okay. All right, so here we are with another funky camera angle, looking down into the belly of the beast, obviously. Before I get started, as far as pointing out what I'm finding in here, what needs to be done, what should be done, and what have you, I'm going to talk about, you know, just kind of reverse a little bit and mention that earlier on, the whole point of what I was doing was just a quick baseline as far as where everything was sitting with cartridge alignment, as far as the basics go with our, you know, again, our yaw angle, our roll angle, everything was in the ballpark there. Everything was looking pretty good. So that tells me that the stylus wasn't riding in the groove all, you know, cattywampus and tweaked, and, you know, it was looking good as far as that goes. The anti-skating force looks like it was set okay. I'm going to test that a little further. So again, I'm trying to look at all the factors that would cause, or that could cause, that right channel to be diminished because of the way that the needle, the stylus, is riding in the groove. If it's, you know, favoring one side of the groove over the other, if it's being pulled or whatever because it's riding, you know, it's riding out of alignment, or it's being pulled over too much, or whatever the case. So, you know, and tracking force as well. I just wanted to make sure that was in the ballpark. and it looked okay. I was at what, about 1.5 grams. I think that cartridge should be about between 1 and 1.5 grams or thereabouts. Again, I didn't look it up, but I know it's in the ballpark. So that, and again, ohming out the cartridge, make sure that there's not some kind of gross imbalance going on there. So everything is looking good. So I got a good baseline established there. So as far as what's going on down here, and a matter of fact, let me zoom in real quick. Okay, so you can probably see that the tone arm wiring exits this point here and terminates at this terminal strip along with the cable wiring. And as I mentioned a moment ago, this is not the original cable. That's okay. There's a couple of strain relief points, and I'll get into that in a minute. So the soldering in here wasn't all that great, but that doesn't appear to be the problem. Although the soldering is pretty chunky and all that, not the neatest soldering. All right, so you can see this clamp that somebody fashioned here. There's another one over here. But this one appears to be the problem, and the reason I know that, like I said, I know it's not these connections here, and I'm going to explain that. So again, this clamp was clamped onto the insulation really tight. You can see the indentation on the insulation here, and although it didn't break the exterior insulation, I think over time with some movement of the cable and whatnot, or just sitting there clamped really tight onto this, it obviously disrupted the insulation, probably wore down the insulation internally, and that's what's causing our problem. And the reason I know this too is because when I was yanking on the on the cable, which I was doing that right where the cable exits the turntable, I was holding onto it outside over here and kind of yanking around, and we saw the problem on the scope when I would do that. The channels were dropping out, mainly the right channel, but the left channel too. And the reason I know it's not the connections is because when I opened up the bottom here and I was pulling on the cable and moving it around, none of this section in here was moving. It was completely immobile. So the strain relief was doing its job, so only this part of the cable here was kind of flexing a little bit, but the rest of it was completely immobile. Of course, now that there's no strain relief, this is moving around, as you can see here, but that wasn't the case earlier. So that's why I know that the problem is internal. So in other words, I'm going to be replacing the cable. And of course, in the process of replacing the cable, I'm obviously going to redo the solder joints again, because now I have to desolder everything anyways, of course. I have a replacement cable here. Let me just bring it into view. I suppose I can back this off a little bit, yeah. So I have a cable here that, I made up. So again, because this is a working unit, auto return is working just fine and all that. The movement of the tone arm is nice and free. The tone arm is not getting bound up. In other words, it's pivoting fine across its range of travel. All that stuff mechanically is working just fine. So I'm not going to go in and do a mechanical restoration, pull everything apart, clean and re-lubricate the mechanism. I don't have the time to do that right now, and that's not what the customer brought this in for anyways. Yes, I will put a few drops of oil in the motor here. There's a couple little holes for that. In fact, it says right here, oil. So yeah, I will oil the bearing here. I am going to oil the spindle here. That's why I have this removed. You can probably see down in there the oil is done. Okay, it's kaput. So I'm going to drop the spindle. I'm going to clean out the spindle housing. I'll show that in the next video. I just want to bring this out because I'm going to be getting in touch with the owner now that I've evaluated it and whatnot. And then in the next video I'll go into everything. Oh, and another thing, this wiring here, let me actually zoom in on that. So this wiring here, from here to here that feeds the light on the top, all throughout its length, it looks like it was chewed up, like maybe a mouse got in here or something and chewed the wiring. Yeah, it's all chewed up along the length, so I need to replace this. Wire here. So I'm going to get with the customer, otherwise let them know everything that's going on that I found in here to be the problem, and there you go. So thanks for tuning in, everyone, and as I always say, peace, love, music, and the vintage audio that brings it to your ears. Till next time, y'all take care.
This has been a Spinning Head production.